Don't break my heart, my achy, breaky heart. I just don't think you'd understand.
I haven't heard this song for so long. Who is that? That's Miley Cyrus's dad, right?
Billy Ray Cyrus. Billy Ray.
Billy Ray Cyrus, right? I remember that. That's got to be late 80s or is it early 90s?
It's got to be late 80s because my story with that was my huge crush in grade 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Ooh, this sounds serious.
Yeah, it was very serious. That was the song that was like I would play at home.
Oh my God, no. Oh. Okay, it was really hard to get those songs on though because they were on the radio and then you had to find them in the radio. Did you have a record player or a cassette? What was going on?
A cassette. I had a cassette player.
Yeah, I did too. I didn't have that tape though.
My sisters would have had it for sure. So my sisters are like 5 and 7 years older than me. So they had that kind of stuff going on. So I'm sure I just snuck it in from them.
I had this JVC boombox and I was so happy when I think I got it for Christmas one year. My sister and I both had one. And like, that was the coolest. And the amount of recordings I did, like off of the radio, like sitting there listening to like Casey Kasem's Top 100 on the weekends and all the time, just to be able to press those two buttons together. And you have to press two at the same time to make it record. And then to get that, like, that was serious commitment to music. And then you would finally have a tape finished.
The level of satisfaction you got when you nailed it.
Oh my God, that was everything. We didn't have phones. This is what we were doing with our time in our bed.
Yeah, laying in bed crying over our crushes.
I want to marry this boy. He's so cute.
Totally.
I don't know him at all, but he's good at sports.
He likes sports and so do I.
Oh, it was a simpler time.
It really was. There wasn't much else for me, I'll tell you that.
Well, you were like me. You were into sports too, speaking of sports. We were both big sports people. So I think there was boys and there was sports and then there was like kind of schoolwork, but not for me, not really so much. It was really, I didn't put much effort into that. It wasn't so much a thing for me.
Yeah, when I was young, it was boys, sports, and for sure, I liked the schoolwork. I liked the writing. I liked doing math. I loved like racing when there was like any sort of racing competition game in math. Oof, that was right up my alley. Yeah.
Yeah, anything competitive for sure. I would do that. And I just wanted to get through my work so fast and like be the best at it. So I just like blazed through it, but I didn't think much about it. I just was like, okay, do it. So I can like go and like gaze at that cute boy who's like 2 desks down.
Isn't that so funny when your desk got to be beside the cute boy?
Oh my God. Highlight of the day or the year. Sometimes it was a year. Like a whole school year could be defined by like your desks touching or he's right beside you.
He's right. I get to talk to him every day. Oof, that was amazing. I remember at one point it was like I would be just staring at the teacher, not like shooting daggers, but a little bit of like, come on, like longing, like, come on, move me close to him. You must know I like him.
I know, but then I do remember too, then like if you liked each other, then getting separated. Like I remember when you got a bit older and it was obvious and they would be like, they would move you apart because they know you're like passing notes or you're like just being ridiculous, staring at each other all day, not doing schoolwork.
We actually never passed notes. Our class was really small. I went to a French immersion school. And I think there was maybe 12, 10 kids in my class. We played cards in the middle of class. Like, I don't know how we did it, but we played actual card games. We all got separated because we were full on in a competition in the middle of class. And they didn't really appreciate that too much. But it all led to Billy Ray Cyrus.
So one of my most traumatizing moments, which it kind of is related because it, in a weird way, it fits. This is grade 1. So what, 6, 7 years old? I was obsessed. Do you remember the felt pen packs you had to buy, like you had to buy for school or they provided? They had 2 shades of purple in them. They had like kind of a lighter pinky purple and a dark purple. I was obsessed with this lighter color purple. I was so obsessed with this purple that I didn't want anyone else in the class to have it. Again, I'm 6 years old. I'm slowly stealing everybody's pens over like weeks. I was pretty smart about it. I was like, I didn't want anyone to know. I'm like, every now and then I'm just going to take one home. And then my mom busted me. Right. And she was like, why is there a stack of purple felt pens? And like, this isn't like now kids have like so much of everything. This was like, if you had something, people saw it. They knew, right? You knew what every single toy was. It was just very limited. We didn't have a lot of money. So having a stack of like purple felt pens, also hidden. I can't remember where I hid them. I know they were in the basement, but like where they were exactly, I don't remember. And so she's like, you have to go take them back into class and you have to give them back to each person. And we're going to go talk to the teacher. I was like mortified because I just realized, okay, I was actually stealing for one thing, which is like, that's not okay. But I didn't really know it was like that bad. I knew that my desire for the purple felt pen was really strong, and that my desire for other people,
that outweighed everything.
That did. And so then I realized like what I had done was like really bad. And then I have to tell the teacher and then I get in a lot of trouble. And then I had to go give them back. And the thing that was so mortifying about it was that I had to give it back to the guy that I had the crush on. And then he was going to know I was a thief. Then he wouldn't like me anymore.
He would know all the bad things about you.
I don't think he even liked me to begin with. This was grade 1.
He's out playing soccer, like, or football or something like.
Yeah. He doesn't care. So I don't even remember what happened at that point.
I have to be honest. I have to tell my shitty parts of myself to this boy at 6 years old. Oh, and doesn't that just follow us through life?
Yeah.
And that's what I think we're going to chat about today is heartbreak. And like all the different kinds of heartbreak there is. But then really what it gets down to is just the hugest sensation in your heart and how it actually feels like your heart is breaking. Like when you allow yourself to feel your heart, it feels like it's getting torn in two, ripped apart.
It does. And, I think it actually, for me, when I'm working with people, it actually is shattering energetically. There is a complete shatter. I think that's the most beautiful part of it and the most painful part of it. And it's insane that this intense beauty and pain coexist at the same time. And I know it's easy to fixate on the pain part. Obviously, that's like, I can't breathe, it's shattering, it's breaking, it aches. But there's also so much beauty in that.
So what's beautiful about it?
The beautiful part is that it's crumbling and shattering so that you can rebuild in a different way. And now, are most people up for that challenge? I mean, certainly many are, but many aren't. For many, this is like into a spiral spin of can be depression, really hard times. But I think there is a reason why the songs get written that are you go into it, you feel it, and you come out the other side stronger. And for me, that stronger is a symbol of a different person. You become a different version of yourself, but we have to be careful because this is where we start to put the armor on too. And this is where we start to close our heart off. So like sometimes people think stronger, like, oh, she's so strong or he's so strong. But it's like, how thick is that armor that's around your heart that's got you there?
Let's take it to an adult relationship. You and the love of your life. You meet, you connect, and then there's heartbreak, whether that's through death, divorce, illness, whatever it is. Like there can just be so many ways that heartbreak happens. You're torn up inside. Now, do you actually feel it or do you just start building and protecting yourself? So those are the two ways that I think like strength can be perceived by other people, but it's when you go into your actual heart that you notice like, am I actually feeling this or am I protecting myself? And I think it's okay to protect yourself until you're ready. You might not be like grief happens and a certain amount of time that needs to be there for the grief to come out and for it to be felt. And you might not be ready to feel all the grief in an instant, like in a moment.
Yeah, I think this is why like it's the story of like the guys, they go and get some beer and they like hang out and they just like drink and the women go get the ice cream and watch the movies. But it's like to distract yourself from the intensity of that pain. And I would argue that really the key is at some point you go into the pain.
I agree.
And then that prevents that wall from just hardening and getting thicker and thicker, which then causes issues in your next relationship too. Then you have this big wall of protection up. It becomes really hard to be vulnerable and be yourself and be a reflection of what that is within you.
Well, and I think what you said there is like, are you truly being yourself in your next relationship, or are you being the armor? Like a whole different identity is developed and created in order to protect yourself and how you want to be with that person, because you're going to just, your heart might not be ready yet.
Yeah. And this is where the attachment theories come in too, right? And this is like, that's what creates that. And then are we anxiously attached? We just can't let them out of our sight. Oh my God, what is he doing? Or what is she thinking? Or like all those things. Or are we avoiding the other extreme, right? Are we just like not going in there? There's no way. Like, hi, yeah, just keeping it superficial.
Yeah. You talked about like finding the time to go into your heartbreak. And I think for different people, it can happen at different times. Like some people might be like, I'm ready to do it right now. Some people might be like, I need 30 days. Like there's no actual timeline of when you're ready to go into this heartbreak, but it does need to happen in order for you to get to yourself, which is what you said. But in a lot of the stuff that I used to study, they'd suggest things. Don't start working on this after grief for 30 days so that you have time. They'd put a timeline on it. It was like a suggestion of just, for me, it became a suggestion of just allowance for yourself to just sit in it for a moment, see what's going to happen, and then decide when you can actually go into it and not completely destroy yourself.
If you're able, I hate rules and timelines, but that'll be like the title of so many things for me. Just no more rules. I've always been like that. It is important to go into it at some point. If you can go into it right away, I think all the better. But I mean, it's just impossible sometimes. Sometimes your heart is broken and you have kids and you're at work the next day and like you have to do life. And God, that's tough. Also,
I think it also depends on the type of heartbreak, right? Like, is it one that you saw coming? Is it a complete shock? If you were to talk about death, for example, is it something that you saw coming? Is it something that you've been kind of preparing for? Is it a sudden death? Is it a death of relief? Like that can happen too. And then there's heartbreak associated with that. Like there's so many different ways that your heart can feel these experiences in life. That's going to also affect the timeline of when you're ready.
somebody close to me had a partner and they were engaged. They were nearly married. And she died very suddenly of pancreatic cancer. I just remember like that grief and that heart and the way that he grieved. Like I had just never seen that before. I had felt that before when I had some close people to me die, but to see that sort of a bit on the outside and to see what he went through. And then he got married to another person he met shortly thereafter, which I think can happen. And then his heart physically started going into pain and he ended up having to have heart surgery. This is the thing about heartbreak. It really actually can physically harm your heart and cause all sorts of issues. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible how our physical body reflects what's going on in our emotions.
Okay, so let's talk about it energetically. What do you see when like that's happening? Like what happens to the energetic system?
Yeah, it's so different for each person, but often there's a shutdown. Like what I often see is just a shutdown and an avoidance. It's too much. It's just too much. And like to move through that, to feel that intense pain and to sit in it, what might be for days, weeks, months, in order to give yourself permission to go in there, when also society kind of is like, are you okay?
They're waiting for you to be better.
They're waiting for you to be better and they want you to be okay. And what can I do? And we have this idea like that being in that kind of grief for too long isn't okay. We start getting worried about people. This is where we start. You're going to need a pill for that. You need to sleep, all these things. We're not able to fully support people in that space to just be in there. Also, each person is so different. There is a time where you can be in it and then you have to force yourself to go out and engage with people. If you just spend weeks and days and months, wallowing in your own misery, this can be just as harmful too. So there's not a right answer, but I wish that our society was at least set up to support more people, giving them a place to talk and to be, and letting them know that there's not a protocol to follow that just makes us all go away. Actually, the protocol, if anything, is to allow yourself to feel and to be with it to some extent.
Often I think there's still an attachment to the outcome that we're going to be better. We're going to do all this stuff and then we're going to be better. I'm going to feel for 3 days and then I'm going to be better. It's not really how it works.
That is such a good point. The whole thing in life is to accept where you're at right now. Right. And I think this is why the whole healing industry, we've got a little bit carried away. All of this stuff is there for good reason, right? You're also okay. And you're okay in whatever state you're in. And I think this is why people have a hard time living life, because we're so focused on that future outcome. Either we're replaying stories in the past, especially if this is heartbreak. So we go into the past over and over again. Or in other ways, we're thinking about the future and like where I'm going to get. I'm going to feel better when this is going to happen. I'm going to be okay then. And we just keep missing ourselves right now. And then it feels like we're not living.
Well, we aren't living, right? In that instance, when you're constantly looking towards the outcome, you're living for that, because that's when you're going to feel better. That's where it gets a little bit difficult, I think. It gets really hard when you're in the middle of a heartbreak and you want something so badly that you just keep looking externally for anything that will make you feel better. And then that means you're not living for yourself, but you're living for that external gratification, satisfaction, anything to just make it go away. And it's obvious to people what it feels like to sit in heartbreak. Like, I just don't think people know what that feels like. One, for people around you to allow you to do it. For two, though, for you to allow yourself. What if you just had a little compassion for yourself and said, hey, this wild thing happened, and maybe for a month, a week, a year, a day, 6 months, I don't know the timeline, I'm just going to feel shitty and I'm going to feel really sad. And then there's going to be moments that I'm going to feel okay. And it's in those moments of feeling okay that you can just start to like begin to trust that at some point things will shift. We often get so caught up in like the feelings of like the intensity of the grief and the heartbreak that we don't notice the moments that we feel okay. It's in those moments that at some point, I'm going to feel differently. And I'm going to be a different person. Like you said from the beginning, I'm going to be a different person.
That person I talked about before, he is now has the most amazing partner, and they're happy, and he found his person, and it's incredible. That pain, but I mean, gosh, the people I work with that have lost their children, those are the ones where you know that there's going to be something missing in your heart for the rest of your life. That's how that is. And learning how to live again with that pain.
I have 2 children. They're amazing. I love them. At one point, I was a horrible mom. I really was. The heartbreak of like facing what that was and what that meant was awful. Like it was actually, I could like cry right now. It was so painful. So much stuff in that. And then I am going to cry. You might have to talk, Brie, because it was like, you sat with me through this. So you know, that grief and heartbreak, it changed me. It really did. And like sitting and facing it forced me to become a completely different person. I guess it didn't force me. I chose when I like sat there and faced it and saw what was going on, that like I needed to be a different mom, and I wanted to be. But it was through grief that this happened.
Well, I mean, one, I just want to say how incredible it was watching, being there while you went through this. So, I mean, you did it. Look, for in this example, parents especially, they don't want to go there, because that means admitting they were doing a lot and maybe they did actually cause some harm to their children. And that's really hard to face when we know we just want to protect our children and we want to do right by our children.
And I will say, like, in my heart, like it was unintentional. Like I wasn't intentionally.
And I think this is the case for everybody. I mean, not everybody, but 99% of people, that's what makes it harder to go there. Oh, like that was not okay. Like everything about.
Like I wasn't showing up in the way that I would want to show up for my kids. Yeah.
And then to allow yourself to go into that, to first see it, to become aware of that, to feel that in your body, and to grieve that. I mean, that is hard to do. It's really hard to do.
Any parents that are noticing anything for themselves, from my own experience. So I started noticing it, one, within my children. Like there was things that were going on that I was like, okay, this is more. There's something more. There's something going on. And I've talked about this in previous episodes. And then the second one was I actually did a workshop, and it was called Freedom from the Past. And that was where you really connected to yourself as like, it was inner child work, but it connected to yourself as like a young child. And you went into that space and like witnessed your parents and how they looked at you and acted, again, all unintentionally. There was never like malicious intent that I felt, I started noticing those things within myself. And you always hear people like, oh, I never want to turn out to be my mom or like my dad or something. I really started noticing how like just the most subtle things, how they affected me as a child. And then I was noticing, okay, like if I'm doing this with my children, that's obviously going to affect them. It can be like the smallest thing. It does have an impact on how they feel. And it impacts them as like a 40-year-old woman in a workshop doing inner child work. And you kind of just see it in that specific case. Like it was just like right in my face. That is a part of it.
Even us as children that went through hard things, a part of us needs that, right? For whatever reason, that does unlock some things. It does help us be the people we are today. Does the future need to look like that, where everybody just go through so much struggle and trauma and all the hard stuff? No, I think we're getting away from that as the energy of the world is shifting. But I think it has been needed. And it has been needed for us to come to know that sort of pain so that we have the ability to move through that. Anyone listening to this that has children and is like, oh, I wonder, right? Also know that your kid also needs this too. Whatever they've been through, and it's hard, and you're like, I effed up so much. Like, God, also know that like it's okay. It is okay. It's what you're gonna do from now on. Like that's the thing. They needed whatever it was.
It is where it gets to the point where it's like, well, they are their own person, right? Like they are in their own experience on earth in this world. They needed that experience for themselves to create some sort of resilience. But that also means that a part of it for me was like being able to notice that in them so I could then allow them to hold space for them to have that experience. And so that I'm no longer like impacting constantly.
Right. Because we do have a hard time. In some ways, parents, we accept our children for exactly who they are. And in other ways, we don't, because we want them to be successful or be happy, whatever our desired outcome is for our children, which isn't a bad thing. There's a pressure, there's an expectation, there's an outcome attached that sometimes I think prevents us from actually seeing them and their truth and their own magic and allowing them to just be in full expression and living like that. And we apply the way that we were raised and how we live, and we apply that to our kids. And we don't have to anymore. Our kids can live a completely different life than us. The earth, the paradigm of everything's changing now. We do not have to keep repeating the same patterns that we did. We can allow our kids to be different and to be free from all of that. And so that might be scary right now. It's like, but what? They need a good job, and they need to be respectful, and they need to be happy, and they need to, marry a great person and have children. And I want to be a grandparent, and like all the things.
I want my kid to be a sports player. Like what? We can get into the grief of that. Grieving your own expectations, it can also be a little heartbreaking. Like when you grieve your outcomes attached to your kids, well, it can be pretty intense, actually, like the grief associated with it. I don't think it's necessarily, well, for some people it might be earth shattering. I don't know. But you have all this attachment to outcome. And when you are hoping to or desiring to free your kids from your own outcomes, that ain't easy.
Wow. This is a lot of heart shattering talk today.
We're going to wrap it up today. But I think there is a lot more to the relationship heartbreak that's there.
There really is. And I think this is the most common thing that I work with people, whether it's a marriage that they're trying to make work, whether it's going through a divorce, whether it's that sudden, like, I don't want to be with you anymore, whether it's just like a slow decline of a relationship and it falls apart, like all the different ways of that, whether you just suddenly meet somebody and you just feel more connected to them than you ever thought imaginable, all of it.
And then what do?
Go into the pain.
Don't break my heart. you sing Billy Ray. That's what you do.
Yeah. Put that on repeat. Everything's going to be fine.
You just lay on your bed, listen to Billy Ray.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that story. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening. We love you guys.
We love you. Okay, thanks for listening, everyone.